We continue with part two, and we are still traveling with Sargent. And we have a couple works that kind of work around the similar theme of the Spanish dancer. So we're going to look at a few of these very quickly. This is one of the more simple compositions, but we'll see this woman, this exact stance again in another painting here in a second. But again, when we look at this and we look at just the mastery of how he's painting this, that elbow really just shooting straight out at us. But I just love the mystery he's able to create with her kind of moving in and out of the darkness that is created by her own outfit. Again, we have this very solid black form. We don't actually see all of her face. It's covered in shadow, adding to kind of this mystery. But the one thing that you just feel from this so much is the movement within the figure. Here we have a separate version of it, and this is really kind of his big masterpiece, his early masterpiece, El Jaleo. It is, again, as it says, it's 12 feet in length there. Just a wonderful piece of art. I always fall in love with that gentleman who's falling asleep in the background there. But something like this, when you look at all the wonderful little pieces that he has in this, all of the different expressions, and how we have this woman not quite in the center of the canvas, just to the right, but balanced out by the instruments that are hanging out on the wall up in the left corner. And again, we have this line of black outfits leading into this woman, and then after that there's like this explosion of color, almost like this factory, if you will. We continue to travel, and again, this is kind of the fun thing about looking at Sargent's work, is you do go to a variety of locations. This is in Algiers in 1880, and I believe that this is a watercolor. And again, when we look at this, even if this isn't one of his watercolors, it's an incredible balance of painting, because again, when we think of watercolor paintings, an important thing to remember is you don't have the color white. You have to use the paper itself as the aspects of white. So when you look at a scene, you kind of have to calculate what the scene will be on your paper before you even start, and be able to kind of put in where all of the white pieces are. And when we look at this composition, he does a marvelous job of that. And then we move to compositions like this one, where again, when we think about the Impressionist kind of working at this time, this is very impressionistic to me. But this is one of the more impressionistic paintings you will see from Sargent. Again, the people in the background have almost been just transformed into shapes and colors, and this huge swath of white that we have through the center of the composition is really the focus, and it almost seems like the people and everything else are kind of popping out of this massive white space that he's creating, that we can only imagine to be a piece of water. Up in the left corner, again, when you look at that big splotch of white and the woman kind of with her hands there, again, this is very much in my mind, his watercolor technique, using that white for all its power. As we continue here, again, I have a few images here where it's almost there's not that much dialogue to actually embrace here, rather just to enjoy the artist himself. And we're looking at something like Stringing Onions, and we look at the composition. It's just amazing the amount of technique that this man has, and his ability to make these scenes so mystical and so real at the same time. And we get this feeling like every single object in this is perfectly balanced. Again, we see this little girl sitting in the bottom left corner, but if we look at the top right corner, we have this open window forming this wonderful balance. And again, we don't have the woman in the exact center of the canvas. We almost have this line forming the balance there. A portrait of Vernon Lee from 1881. And again, when I was speaking about the Velázquez technique of this immediacy of the portrait, when you look at something like this, you really do, there's a fluidity to it. It almost looks like it's wet, even as we're looking at it in the contemporary, even though it was painted, 120 years ago or so. Again, when you look at this, it really does look like the paint is still wet. And again, I love the fact that he has these two triangular forms right in the center of the composition to kind of balance out the instability of the brushstroke all around it. We have these amazing solid geometric forms right in the middle. And we continue to travel, and we go where most of the artists have went to during this time, and that is Venice. Venice is this beautiful city to enjoy, not only for the atmosphere, the water, and the impressionistic reflections of light on the water itself, but Venice has often been kind of associated as this kind of pleasure city. So I imagine when people would go out on their larger tours of Europe, this would be one of the reasons to go to Venice as well. But the next few images that we have from Venice are really just, again, not that much commentary other than looking at the work itself and how he's able to create these amazing compositions. Again, the more we look at this, the more I'm looking at his compositions and seeing how he's able to do some of these phenomenal things. I love this narrow walkway that we have on the left and how it almost feels like we can just kind of barely fit through here. But again, one of these back alleys that you might see in Venice if you walk through the city, and a wonderful, wonderful portrait on the right, full of contrasting colors. We have this red along with this very, very soft blue. And of course, we have this nice softer yellow as well. Again, and we look at these compositions and we think of him painting in Venice, it's amazing how he's capturing these images. And again, when we compare this to some of the other people that we have going to Venice that we've looked at and studied, it's always amazing to see people's different interpretations of this wonderful city. I personally love this painting. Again, perfectly balanced composition. We have two larger figures in our far right corner, but directly across in the left we have a collection of things to kind of balance out what we see. And again, when we look at this and we look at these two women working in the foreground in this aspect of realism that we get from them, and then as we push off and we get further and further away, it does get much more impressionistic as we continue down this alleyway. And I love the fact that we're looking in some of these images as if we're just wandering through Venice, and we're really not even being noticed by the local inhabitants. This is almost the fly on the wall type of technique. We eventually do return home, but we do start to see some of these phenomenal portraits that Sargent is so incredibly famous for, and we also need to put into perspective here that his fame is really starting to rise. If I get some of these names wrong, I do apologize. Edward and Marie-Louise Pellerin. This is, again, we see a lot of portraits of him doing children here, which is kind of always a headache from my understanding. If this is the right portrait, he made this little girl. They had a horrible time with each other, and she had to sit way too many times and had just a horrible time of it. But when you look at this, and again, this is kind of what we find in good portrait paintings, is we see the character, we see the aspects of the individual kind of permeating out from the painting itself. It's not just a likeness, it's the personality as well. The Daughters of Edward Darley Boyd. This is always an interesting composition, but Edward Darley Boyd was an amateur painter, and so when we look at this, he gave him a little bit of freedom, I think, in painting, because again, if this is a portrait of these four daughters, it's not a very good portrait. We only see one side of one of the girls, and she's halfway in darkness. Really, the two girls in the foreground are really the only really likable likable in terms of looking like portraits. This is just a strange composition, but you got to love these giant oriental vases that, from my understanding, someone did some research into it, are these the fake knockoff ones that you would have bought in Paris at the time. Mrs. Henry White. This is a great painting to look at to kind of understand Sargent's portrait method. Again, when we look at this, we have a very nice portrait of an individual, very nice clothing, and we have a set of furniture around it. And again, a lot of these elements might have actually belonged to Sargent himself. Things like the furniture he was known to have in his studio, and I believe even some of the clothing he would have as well. It's also at this time that he starts to foster a reputation in England. He starts sending paintings across the sea there, and he's doing very well in the Paris Salon, so he actually starts submitting to what is the Royal Academy or the English salons of the time. Just a wonder. I keep going back to these wonderful little watercolors that he does, but again, as an artist, when you look at these, it's just it really takes you aback that a person can paint like the image we just saw, and then we look at something like this, and the amount of flexibility he's able to attain in how he's actually painting. We have this wonderful thick red, but this very, very delicate white on the top of it. And again, when we think about the medias he's using and the complexity of being able to understand how to get this type of material, again, as a painter myself, when I'm looking at a composition like this, it does take you back a little bit of how much those white flowers permeate off the canvas surface. A few more paintings that we have from this time period that I really do enjoy. The Dinner Table at Night from 1884. Again, this wonderful scene. You can almost imagine yourself sitting at the table having a wonderful intellectual conversation with these people. But again, there's a little bit of a haziness to this. It's again, the people are pushed farther back, which adds to kind of the mystery of the occasion. And then you have these red lights that kind of push us towards seductive or lustful ideology when we look at the painting. And again, when we think about the man himself, Sargent, from my understanding, he was quite a notorious bachelor wherever he might have lived. So this might just be a scene of kind of the people around him. And just as a little bit of fun, I thought I would put in the painting of the table from the next morning. And I believe the housekeeper coming in and cleaning up after everything. But again, just to show the range and complexity of this artist and what he was really able to attain. And again, when we look at the compositions between the two of them, and also how he's kind of balancing in and out of focus within the composition and creating something as you would actually see it in real life, mimicking the way that vision works rather than creating this inflexible stability, solidity, if you will, within all of the objects themselves.